Where are you from? How often do you get asked that question? I, along with 5.4 million other British Asians, would probably say we get asked it pretty often. My parents were born in India, and I'm from here, born and bred in London, which makes me British Indian. But I guess the question, where are you from, arises because we don't look like the 81% of white majority in this country. And therefore, we go through this identity conflict where we feel like we're not quite brown enough, and we're definitely not white enough. And that is the struggle that many British Asians face. The challenge of several contrasting, sometimes conflicting, identities. So let's start with identity itself. Identity is not merely the passports we hold or the languages we speak. It is deeply ingrained in our values, our practices, and the way we see the world. For many British Asians, it's balancing the rich heritage of the Asian continent with the distinctly dynamic modern ethos of British life. Now, this balance is not always easy. Often it involves a dance between tradition and adaptation, between the expectations our families have for us versus the aspirations we harbour within ourselves. So let's take it a little further back and look at how we actually got here. The story is similar for many first-generation British Asians whose grandparents immigrated to the UK in the 1960s, primarily from India, Pakistan and Bangladesh. This was made easier due to the British Empire having long-standing colonial ties with the Indian subcontinent. This led to South Asian communities across the UK, particularly in London, Birmingham, Leicester and Bradford, creating vibrant ethnic enclaves. One such area was a town in West London called Southall, often referred to as Little India, which is where my family ended up. Today, 45% of British Indians identify as Punjabi. And back then, Southall saw a large influx of immigrants from the Indian subcontinent of Punjab, most of them coming here seeking better economic opportunities. Punjabi is the fourth most popular language spoken here in the UK, and an identity that I hold very dear to my heart is that of being Punjabi. Like many first generations, English is not our first language. We have been brought up being exposed and taught the language that our parents would be conversing in. Because like many arranged marriages, there was often one parent who spoke little to no English. And therefore, the common language would be that of Punjabi. Then as they start building a life and family together here in the UK, they are also learning English. Now, here's the thing. I use the word learning loosely because it's not like there was Duolingo back then. No, none of that. They're learning on the job, literally. And therefore, at times, unfortunately picking up words and phrases incorrectly and then teaching us. I vividly remember a moment at school where everyone was talking about their favourite cakes. Some said they liked chocolate cake, others strawberry shortcake. And I said, oh, I love Black Forest Ghetto. Heads turned, and I felt everyone staring at me, until someone very promptly corrected me. It's gatto? And I remember thinking, yeah, that sounds about right. I can't wait to go home and put my family in place and be like, actually, guys, it's gatto. But actually, in that moment, I felt really uncomfortable. I felt like I didn't belong. I felt like I had to constantly check my English because I didn't want to fall into the Indian stereotype that I knew they were all thinking anyway. Oh, the little Indian girl doesn't know any English, nah? And it's experiences like these where it becomes more and more evident that maybe we're not as British like our white counterparts. Therefore, in a bid to fit into British culture and my peers, I created this divide where I had two sides. I had my brown side with my brown friends, wearing brown clothes, eating brown food, listening to brown music like Jay Sean, Rishi Rich and Juggy D. And I had my white side, white friends, white clothes, white food, listening to S Club 7. And it all seemed to work, as long as these two sides never met. But here's the thing, they did meet. Because one day, my white friend, who, for legal reasons, we're going to call her Francesca, okay? Francesca was coming to my brown home to study, and I was riddled with fear and anxiety for 3 reasons. 1, I live in a Sikh household, and in my Sikh household, we have these beautiful, beautiful paintings of our beloved gurus. These are strong warriors. But back then, I didn't see it like that. I saw big, scary men with long, long beards, big turbans, holding swords. Some of these swords dripping with blood. And I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed that Francesca would see this and think we live in some sort of cult. 2, the food. Now, my fellow Asians, and actually any culture for that matter, should be able to resonate with this. We are used to coming home to a beautifully cooked, wholesome curry with freshly made roti, because that's dinner. But the day Francesca was coming over, no, I couldn't have that. So I asked my mum to make something a little bit more simple, less fragrant, and let's say quintessentially British. So of course we made pasta. And lastly, the biggest thing I was embarrassed about was my dad. My dad with the strong Indian accent. I know what you're thinking, and it makes me sad that I thought that way, because what my dad and that generation who came to this country with little to nothing have achieved, and how they've paved the way for their children to strive and thrive, is something I truly value and respect now. But back then, I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed that my dad would see Francesca and be like, "All right, Frankie, you want the cake? You want the Black Forest ghetto?" And I would have died, because it would have ruined the white persona I had taken so long to create. I became increasingly aware of these competing identities and curious about how I could reconcile with them. This one or the other approach can cause such internal conflicts. And the struggles that I've highlighted demonstrate the complex interplay between race, culture, and identity for British Asians. But like any role in your life, it's about bringing out that side of yourself, depending on the situation. For example, a parent isn't always playing a parenting role 24 hours of the day. Or when we answer a call, we code switch. We use our phone voice. Hi, hello. Doing this doesn't make us inauthentic. If anything, it brings out the best version of you. And I love to sprinkle in a bit of my brown self into all of my interactions, because that's me. We come from communities where traditional values are highly emphasized. These communities expect us to follow conventional paths, getting a degree, going into a respected career, getting married and raising a family. But what happens when those traditional Asian values that you've been brought up with collide with a more Western lifestyle? I've always felt different. Like something didn't feel quite the same as everyone else. I was my sensible brown self at home, my fun white self at work. But I also had another side, a hidden side. One thing a brown person living at home with their parents knows all too well is to keep secrets. And I was harboring a big one. And as I felt more and more comfortable with my visible identities, this hidden one was boiling inside me, bursting to come out. It was a Sunday. I remember it well because the EastEnders omnibus was on. Who remembers that? And I'd been staring at my mum for about an hour. She'd asked me a couple of times, "Are you all right?" And so I finally said it. "I need to tell you something. I'm in a relationship for 3 years with a woman." The shock on her face made tears silently pour down mine. Seeing that made her cry. And as I looked over, I realized I wasn't even able to say the words, "Mum, I'm gay," because I saw her trying to piece the information together in her mind. But she found the words for me, because she said one of the most profound things that someone has ever said to me, and that was, "It doesn't change how I feel about you. You are still you, and I still love you." And I hold that moment in my heart always. Now, I wish I could stand here and tell you the journey after was easy. Of course it wasn't, because of course there were challenges due to the intersection of religious, cultural and society expectations. And that came to light when my dad came to know. Now I say came to know because I live in a brown household of all females. My dad gets told things by my mum. That's just how it works. And so when he did come to know, the first thing he said to me was, "Aapa nahi edda karde." Our people don't do these kinds of things. And you know what? He wasn't wrong. Our people didn't. And I didn't have an answer for that. I couldn't tell him one person in our community who was actively doing what I was doing. There were no gay role models or gay behaviour that I was mirroring. At that point, there also wasn't much exposure on TV. Definitely not from a brown person. And actually, to be honest, I probably couldn't name many people now either. So, sideline. Any British Punjabi gays out there, could you give my dad a call, please? Thanks, much appreciated. Therefore, we cannot dismiss the fact there is still some stigma around homosexuality in South Asian communities, but it's definitely changing. With the decriminalisation of homosexuality in India in 2018, older generations are now seen to have more progressive views on LGBTQ+ issues, which is really great progress. Holding multiple identities is often a complex landscape to navigate, but the gap between traditional Asian values and Western norms is closing. Embracing all aspects of our identities as British Asians is not merely a personal choice, but a collective opportunity. It's a pathway to richer lives, a cohesive community, and a society that truly mirrors diversity. So let us be part of such a society. Let us show the world that our identities are not just to be acknowledged, but celebrated. Let us lead by example so that our multifaceted identities can shine with pride. So that when they ask us where we're from, well, we tell them, we're from right here. Thank you. Thank you.